Welcome to Steelbridge Models, and to my look back to 2023 through the eyes of an artist. If you've been following my channel for a little bit, you might be surprised as I only started 2 months ago actually making videos for YouTube, but I've been working with Blender for a couple of years now. So with that, we also have a full 2023 of creations. And when we entered the new year, I had great expectations. After all, we've just finished 2022 with a Prussian chapter where we focused on Prussian locomotive models, lots of wagons, introduced new passenger wagons, and all these posts I made about this chapter on my Instagram account, it just felt so complete and so well-rounded, and was also very well received by my followers. So I wanted to continue with this trend and start a new chapter with the new year. Now we jump quite a bit in time from pre-1920 to the late 1950s in West Germany. And this first chapter was supposed to focus really on models that I already had, maybe polish up these existing models and fill in gaps. And that was quite fitting to focus my locomotives around the steam standards, as I already had quite a lot of them. So I found the opportunity to update my models of the class 80 as well as the class 24. The later one I wasn't able to show on my Instagram page for a long time, as really my model of it was so outdated compared with my newer models that really a complete overhaul was just necessary. And with that I was also able to fill a substantial gap among my 15-ton standard locomotives, and that was the class 86, so the first newly introduced class for the year. But to really achieve that well-roundedness of the Prussian chapter, since we are now in the post-war years, I thought it was only right to also spend a significant portion on roadside vehicles. So I introduced 2 new trucks with in total 6 different superstructures. We started with the Mercedes-Benz L6600, a very beautiful road train of its day, and also with the Magirus round bonnets, and multiple different superstructures for them, including the firefighter vehicles. And also, to make especially the little tipper truck complete, I introduced my first construction machine, the iconic Fuchs 301 cable excavator, which in a different variant also served as a coaling machine. You know, for maybe smaller stations or train yards which hadn't big coating towers or cranes or anything like that, also a small excavator could do the same job. But continuing with the well-roundedness, I also took the opportunity to expand my range of post-war goods wagons. I already had the basic types, but now it was just the right time to also introduce more specialized variants. For example, the open wagon of the type OMM52 with the smooth sidewalls, or different wagons with openable roofs, also different insulated wagons, and last but certainly not least, also a container wagon for the PA system. But I also introduced a completely new family of passenger wagons, the Donnerbüchsen, which would roughly translate to thunder cans, even though that translation evokes completely different associations than the German word does, because the thunder would imply a certain sense of speed, which these wagons certainly did not have. Oh well. But related to the Donnerbüchsen, we also finally had a modern guardswain for goods trains. But the highlight of this chapter was certainly the second locomotive I introduced, the completely newly modeled V60, that little diesel shunter. And in this sense, it kinda looped back to the beginning of the chapter, as we opened it with the class 80, the old steam shunter, which now got replaced by the modern V60. And once again, this chapter felt very complete, very well rounded. However, when we finished it, it was not early March or maybe early April at the latest as I had planned, but rather July. So all the plans I had for the rest of the year were pretty much out of the window, because there was no time I would be able to achieve them. Which of course is a common problem, that I was just way too optimistic at planning out the year. But you always have to learn it the hard way. And a little bit discouraged and confused about how to continue, the second chapter wasn't really about a specific time or place, but it was more a possibility for me to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes aspects of modeling. And also I took this time to, I don't want to say finish up, but at least clean up many of the models I had created earlier this year. Also go back to even older ones. For example, I completely redid my 2-feet gauge Mallet locomotive, which was absolutely not planned for this year, but hey, I thought it was fun, so I did it. After all, late in 2022, I already updated my 040 and 060 field railway locomotives, so it was only right for the Malay to follow. And of course there was another thing that held me back from starting a big new chapter, and that was my wish for finally creating YouTube videos. I was thinking about it for a very long time and initially wanted to start in late 2022 with it, but just didn't got around doing it. So I intentionally took off many things from my create plate, if you wanna call it like that, so I could focus on actually making videos and maybe finishing up those models that I need for the videos rather than creating new ones. So on the 14th of October, it was finally time to release my first YouTube video. It was a big step for me, but my plan was not to now abandon Instagram completely. So I started eventually a third chapter, which was now supposed to be focused on the early 1960s and maybe also introduce some new models, even though that didn't really happen. Because all the new models introduced here, like the P8 with a tap tender, were all models that I also needed for my YouTube videos. So this chapter was a little bit doomed to be only short-lived with 6 posts in total. But still it gave me the opportunity to also show these models on Instagram. After all, we also saw a couple of new wagons here. For example, the brand new Postmore flat car, as well as the so-called Silberlinge, silver coins. These lovely passenger wagons, which are kind of the successors of the middle entrance wagons. Not quite, they fill different niches, but you know, are definitely related. And also, for the PA container video, I also introduced 3 new different types of containers. So after all, even the third chapter of the year in terms of Instagram post was short, but very sweet. But the year wasn't finished just yet, as I still had the class 01. A locomotive class that is just so important to German railroad history that it's kind of a crime that I didn't have a model of it earlier. But you know, it's a large express locomotive, so it's a very intricate model, which I started already many months ago, but just couldn't bring myself to finish it. But as I planned it to be the Christmas present, I had a deadline and it approached really quick, so I just had no choice but to at least cosmetically finish it. You know, after all, that model is still not complete. It's just complete enough to be shown off. Not even to talk about all the variants, for example the different tenders that the 01 carried over its lifetime. So there's still much to be done, but also it certainly is a highlight of the year. And of course we finished in the hope for a little bit of snow with the rotary snow plow that I already introduced the year before, but now in the original red-brown livery. Now adding everything up together, I always have the feeling that in 2023 I wasn't as efficient as I wanted to be. I wasn't as productive as I wanted to be. But then I catch myself very quickly at just overlooking so many things. Of course, if you just look at the locomotive classes I introduced, which were only 3, or if you also count the P8 with the new caps and tap tenders, which isn't a lot and certainly much less than I wanted to do. But then on the other side, I introduced so many new road vehicles this year, as well as wagons. In total I introduced 11 new wagons to my range. And of course these aren't as shiny and as exciting as locomotives are, but a very important part and also take lots of time and patience to do, especially as researching them and finding good drawings is often quite difficult. And at the end of the day, the main focus of the year was not to introduce new models, but to rather continuing work on already existing ones, updating them, cleaning them up and maybe at least somewhat finalizing them, and that is what I did. If I compare my class 80, how it looked before I began updating it for the first chapter of the year and how it looks now, it's just a difference of day and night. It might not look so dramatically on first sight, but as soon as you start looking at the details, you just see how much work has gone into this one locomotive. And in fact, I wasn't even finished with the class 80 when I showed it off in the context of the first chapter of this year, but I kept working on it. So it was really clean and good enough for the first video. So much in fact that the related class 86 that I introduced in the first chapter of this year, even though it is a new locomotive, is already so outdated again compared to my class 80 that I can't really show it off the way it is, but would have to redo it first. So that really shows how much stuff I actually did do. And related with finishing models, I also thought about many systems. How do I couple my models together? Do I work with exchangeable parts? What are standard pieces that all models kind of use and what are not? And also to make the complete system work, I of course need also track, and not just straights and curves, but also points and crossings. So I spent this time many hours figuring out a good track geometry, and this work is still not completely done, but I roughly know where I'm going. Also focused on track side structures like signals or stations, as well as also roads and traffic signs. And last but certainly not least, I started to work on a system for buildings. You know, a construction kit system with modular pieces that can be rearranged in all different shapes and sizes however I need them. So first of all I showed off the signal box, as well as a small station, and I'm currently working on the very important roundhouse with a turntable in front of it. All of these projects are not nearly done so far, of course, but already consumed a lot of time this year and required me to be innovative and think about many of these basic things which you need to have figured out before you can actually properly start modeling. And last but certainly not least, there were also a handful of locomotive models that I did start, and with some of them progressed very far, but I just wasn't able to get them completely done this year. For some of them I already showed work in progress renders, for others I didn't. And one of them is actually very well progressed, and you will see more about it early next year. So in a way, as we ended 2023 with the class 01 as the big surprise, I can't really call it a surprise as I have hinted at it quite frequently, but as the big highlight of the year, there will also be, well, let's call it a medium-sized surprise early next year, early 2024, which I'm very excited for. And that brings us to the final question. How will SteelBridge models continue? I mean, that's a perfect opportunity to say thank you for your immense support you have given me so far. I'm really quite surprised how well these videos are doing. Of course, in the big picture of YouTube channels, my numbers are very adorable, very small, very quaint. But the continued growth that I've saw since posting my first video really motivates me to keep going and to create even better content in the next year, and even more content, of course, as now we don't have 2 months, but a full 12 months. So I'm very excited for that. In terms of creating new models, we will kinda stick with what we had going on this year, with a large focus on finishing up existing models rather than introducing new ones. That being said, there will be a handful of newly made locomotives, wagons, as well as road vehicles, and some very exciting ones indeed, but not too many. But on the other hand, if you found me through YouTube in the first place and you don't know most of the stuff I posted on Instagram, well, then there will be quite a lot of new models that I haven't showed off on YouTube before, so it will be exciting either way. And as I said, there are some models that I'm really looking forward doing, looking forward showing off, and also experimenting a little bit with YouTube and different video formats. The reason why I delayed starting making videos as much as I did was as it took me quite a while until I found a format which I thought would just work. With many of my early ideas I just wasn't completely content, but there are still different ideas in my head and different things I wanna try out. So once again, thank you all so much for your interest into the content I create, the videos, my models, and for your ever-growing support. Which, even though that might sound quite cheesy, but it is quite important for a channel like mine, as, you know, creating those models, that is kind of a passion of mine. I would do them either way, even if no one cared. But there would be no reason for me to show them off on social media and create videos about them if no one cared. But as there are a good number of people who actually do care about it, well, it wouldn't be wise to stop doing it, so expect to see a lot more next year. But with all that being said, I will take it a little bit easier for the first month of the new year, and rather than focus on putting out videos on a regular basis, I will now focus on working on the background, preparing videos, so that when I will resume with my posting schedule in late January or early February, that you really see a continuous output of content. And I'm very excited to see you back again with my first video of the year, which will be a very exciting one. And with that, I'm wishing you all a wonderful 2024, and to see you all again very soon. Take care.